What if I told you that the happiest, the most peacefully joyful person in 18th century New England was actually a young woman who was slowly, agonizingly starving to death?
I mean, it sounds completely contradictory.
Right? It really does. But welcome to Reformed Thinking. Today we're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating primary source document from the 1730s.
Yeah, we're looking at a text by Jonathan Edwards.
Right. And he was a pastor in Northampton, Massachusetts during this massive period of religious revival.
The First Great Awakening.
That's the one. So the text is called The Instance of Abigail Hutchinson. It's a specific case study that's actually pulled from a larger work of his.
Yeah, his narrative of surprising conversions.
And I know what you might be thinking. A historical account of a young woman dying of a chronic illness centuries ago. Why should you care about this today?
Right, it feels a bit disconnected from our modern lives.
Totally. But what we actually have here is something incredibly rare. Edwards strips away all our modern assumptions about religious emotion and physical suffering and human autonomy.
He's treating this specific case almost like a physician.
Yeah, like he's documenting a completely new medical phenomenon. It gives us this clinical, intensely detailed look into the anatomy of a spiritual awakening.
Because Jonathan Edwards is, he's operating as a spiritual clinician in this text. You have to remember, during the First Great Awakening, people all across the colonies were experiencing these really intense, dramatic conversions.
Huge emotional responses.
Exactly. And Edwards' intent here wasn't to write some sensationalized story,
Yeah.
to sell books or drum up emotional hype for his congregation.
Right.
His goal was to document the genuine operations of the Spirit of God. He wanted to carefully separate factual reality from, well, mass hysteria or pure emotionalism.
Because there was a lot of that going around.
A ton of it. So he was asking an analytical question. What does a real, authentic change to the human heart actually look like?
And how does it behave when it's put under the most extreme physical and psychological stress imaginable? So he starts this case study by establishing a psychological baseline for his subject, Abigail Hutchinson.
All right.
Edwards makes it a point to highlight her background right out of the gate. He tells the reader she came from a rational, understanding family.
Which is a very specific choice of words.
Yeah, he says she was quiet, she was reserved, she was known for a sober and inoffensive conduct.
And he's anticipating his critics by including that specific information.
Oh, for sure.
Because during this historical period, there were so many skeptics who just dismissed all these religious conversions as enthusiasm.
Right, and we should clarify that in the 18th century, enthusiasm didn't mean like, oh, I'm so enthusiastic about my new job.
No, not at all. It meant something closer to fanatical delusion or religious madness.
Like losing your mind.
Yeah. Skeptics argued that these revivals were just contagious emotional manipulation, affecting weak-minded people.
Right.
So by establishing that Abigail's family avoided that contrary extreme of enthusiasm, and that she herself had no natural inclination toward religious melancholy or like being fanciful.
He bolsters the credibility of everything that follows.
Precisely. He's telling the reader, look, this isn't a naturally dramatic person.
Right, she's not making things up.
Right. This isn't someone prone to getting swept away by an emotional crowd.
And that is why Edwards chooses her. If a highly emotional, theatrical person claims to see the glory of God, the skeptics just laugh.
Yeah, they write it off immediately.
But if the most stoic, rational, reserved girl in town suddenly claims her entire worldview has collapsed, well, the skeptics have to pay attention.
She functions as the control group in his theological experiment, basically.
That's a great way to put it. We have this quiet, rational young woman, and she also happens to have a chronic physical illness, though Edwards notes her illness never made her depressed or fanciful.
Right, she stayed level-headed.
So then, the catalyst for her internal change arrives. It happens in the middle of winter on a Monday.
And the trigger is not some massive, booming sermon that shakes the rafters of the church.
No. It's a mundane, casual conversation.
It's so ordinary.
She just hears her brother talking about the necessity of seeking grace. And at the same exact time, she hears local news about another young woman in town who had recently converted.
And her initial reaction to this news is highly revealing.
It really is.
Because it isn't pious agreement or, like, joy for her neighbor.
Not at all.
It's envy.
Yeah, she actually admits she felt this other woman was entirely unworthy of being distinguished by God with such a mercy.
It's just such a raw, honest human reaction, isn't it?
It really is. She looks at her neighbor and thinks, why her? She doesn't deserve that. But then this envy morphs into a firm resolution. Abigail decides she is going to do her absolute utmost to obtain the same blessing for herself.
She sets her mind to it.
Hmm.
But, she approaches it like a problem to be solved purely with human effort.
Right. Logic.
She looks at her situation and decides, okay, I lack sufficient knowledge of the principles of religion to be capable of conversion.
Okay, let's unpack this. Think about her approach, like a university student trying to beat an academic prerequisite.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. The student realizes they can't enroll in the advanced seminar because they lack the basic credits.
So they have to go take the 101 class.
Exactly. Abigail's solution is purely mechanical. She resolves to thoroughly search the scriptures to gain the requisite knowledge. So she immediately opens her Bible to Genesis, intending to read it straight through from the beginning to the end.
It's a logical, rational plan from a logical, rational person.
Totally.
She identifies a perceived deficit, which is her lack of knowledge, and she prescribes a practical solution, reading the entire Bible chronologically.
Like a checklist.
Right. She's treating spiritual regeneration as a mathematical equation.
Yeah.
Like if she inputs enough scriptural information into her brain, she calculates she'll output a state of grace.
But this mechanical academic approach fails spectacularly.
Oh, completely falls apart.
She starts this intense reading schedule on Monday, right? And she keeps it going until Thursday.
Just powering through Genesis and Exodus.
And then the text tells us there is a sudden alteration. This intellectual pursuit just shatters. She is thrown into visceral terror.
Yeah.
Edwards describes it as an extraordinary sense of her own sinfulness hitting her like a flash of lightning.
The terminology Edwards uses here is vital. It wasn't a gradual, dawning realization. It was a sudden, violent illumination.
A flash of lightning.
Right. The entire structure of her self-reliance collapses. When she reads the Bible chronologically, she's met with the absolute, unbending divine law in the Old Testament.
Yeah, she's hitting those heavy law books.
And she's trying to use her flawed, self-centered intellect to grasp a perfectly holy standard.
Yeah.
The shattering occurs because the tool she's using, her own self-reliance, is the exact thing the text is condemning.
Oh, wow.
It's a structural failure of her own ego.
So she completely abandons her chronological reading plan. Genesis is no longer helpful to her. She desperately starts flipping to the New Testament to see if she can find any relief for her terrified soul.
Just searching for a lifeline.
Yeah. She tells Edwards her distress grew for 3 days until she saw nothing but blackness of darkness before her, and her flesh literally trembled for fear of God's wrath.
Edwards records that she was astonished at herself. She realized she had spent so much time being concerned for her frail body, consistently applying to physicians to heal her physical ailments.
Trying to fix her throat.
Right. But she had completely neglected her soul. Her sinfulness appeared awful to her, and she isolates 3 specific pillars of guilt that horrified her.
She breaks down exactly what is terrifying her. It isn't just a vague feeling of, oh, I'm a bad person.
First, she is struck by original sin. She states that she had previously believed she wasn't guilty of Adam's sin because she wasn't active in it.
Right, a very common thought, I didn't eat the fruit.
Yeah. But suddenly she sees that she is completely defiled by it, and that this inherited corruption alone was sufficient to condemn her. In the theological framework Edwards is operating in, the root of human nature is viewed as corrupt, not just the outward fruit of human actions.
The tree itself is bad, not just the apples.
Exactly. Second, she is horrified by her sin of murmuring at God's providence.
Meaning her complaints about her chronic physical affliction.
Yes. She realized that her internal complaining about her sickness was actually a rebellion against God's sovereign arrangement of her life.
Wow.
She saw that she was essentially putting herself in the seat of judgment, declaring that God was managing the universe incorrectly by allowing her to be sick.
That is a heavy realization.
And then third, she feels crushing guilt over lack of duty toward her parents.
Okay, I have to jump in here. Looking at this from a modern psychological perspective, we have a quiet, dutiful, sick girl who is suddenly trembling in fleshly fear of God's wrath.
Right.
She is seeing nothing but blackness of darkness. To a lot of people listening to you today, this looks like an incredibly unhealthy spiral of self-loathing.
Oh, sure.
Her neighbors viewed her as excelling in dutifulness, yet she sees herself as utterly wretched because she didn't obey her parents perfectly or because she complained about feeling sick. How do we reconcile this intense terror with a healthy spiritual mind?
That is a very fair critique. A modern clinical psychologist might read this text and diagnose her with severe religious obsessive-compulsive disorder or acute anxiety.
Yeah, religious trauma, basically.
Right. But to understand this document, We have to view it through the 18th century theological lens of absolute divine holiness.
Okay.
In Edwards's framework, the standard of measurement is not human comparison. When Abigail is terrified of her lack of duty to her parents, she isn't saying she was a juvenile delinquent who committed terrible crimes.
Right. She wasn't robbing banks.
She is saying that her obedience wasn't motivated by a pure, unblemished love for God.
So the external behavior looked flawless to her neighbors, but the internal engine driving the behavior was corrupted by self-interest.
Yes, precisely. In this theological system, human depravity doesn't mean you're as bad as you could possibly be. It means every part of you, even your good deeds, is tainted by self-interest, pride, and a rejection of God's ultimate authority.
That makes sense.
So from Edward's perspective, this terror isn't a psychological illness. It is a moment of profound sanity. It's viewed as an accurate apprehension of reality.
The blinders are off.
The blinders of self-righteousness have been completely removed. For the first time in her life, she is seeing her spiritual condition accurately against the backdrop of a perfectly holy God.
Which explains why her rational reading plan fell apart on Thursday. You cannot read your way out of a structural failure of the heart.
You really can't.
But she doesn't stop trying to save herself. This overwhelming terror actually pushes her to work even harder. And this leads us to an intense physical and spiritual breaking point.
Yeah, she hits a wall.
By Saturday, she is in an absolute frenzy.
She is desperately trying to find relief from the terror. She's reading the Bible and other religious books so intensely that her eyes actually grow dim.
That's terrifying.
She reaches a point where she can literally no longer see the letters on the page.
She is pushing her physically infirm body to the absolute limit. And during this frantic activity, a specific thought arrests her. She remembers Christ's warning in the Gospels, where he tells his followers not to be like the heathen who think they will be heard for their speaking so much.
That verse acts as a mirror for her.
It does. She has a devastating realization. She recognizes she had been trusting in her own prayers and her own religious performances.
Yeah.
Her reading until she went blind, her frantic praying, all of it was just her trying to force God to save her based on the sheer volume of her effort.
Like a transaction.
Right. She was essentially telling God, look at how hard I'm working. You are now obligated to save me. When she realizes this, she hits a massive wall of utter confusion. The text says she didn't know which way to turn or where to seek relief.
She's completely stripped of her coping mechanisms.
Yes.
She can't rely on her intellect because that failed her on Thursday. She can't rely on her religious works because she realizes on Saturday that those are just disguised self-righteousness.
So what does she do?
Well, she seeks out the minister for refuge. She confronts her brother with the countenance of a person in deep distress, demanding to know why he hadn't warned her earlier about her extreme sinfulness.
Wait, I need to stop you there. Because here's where it gets really interesting. She experiences something truly startling at this juncture.
Oh, the enmity.
Yes. She tells Edwards she felt an enmity against the Bible, which greatly frightened her.
Yeah.
She realizes her heart is actively fighting against the very text she is desperately trying to read for salvation. Why on earth would her brain generate hatred toward the cure she's seeking?
Well, think about what the Bible's actually telling her in that specific moment. She wants a manual that says, do steps 1 through 10 and you earn grace.
Right. Humans love a 10-step plan.
The human ego loves a checklist.
Yeah.
It allows us to retain control. But the text is telling her that she brings absolutely nothing to the table. It strips away her autonomy completely.
It's an offense to her pride.
Yeah. The enmity she feels is the human ego realizing it is not sovereign. Even her desire for salvation is mixed with a hostility toward the God who dictates the terms of that salvation without consulting her.
It is like watching a drowning swimmer panicking in the water.
Oh, that's a perfect image.
Right. When someone is drowning, their instinct is to thrash around, to kick, to fight the water with everything they have. And any lifeguard will tell you that a thrashing, panicking victim is incredibly dangerous.
They'll pull you under with them.
Exactly. The thrashing, which is Abigail's intense reading and frantic praying, is actually preventing her rescue. The lifeguard often has to wait until the victim is completely exhausted.
And they have to let them tire out.
They have to wait until the drowning person stops trying to save themselves before they can safely bring them to shore. Abigail had to completely exhaust her own efforts. Her works had to fail her utterly before she was in a posture to be saved.
And her total exhaustion and inability to save herself sets the stage for what happens next.
Because Sunday comes.
Right. She's completely bedridden on the Sabbath day. She's too physically ill from the stress and her chronic condition to even attend public worship.
She can't even go to church.
No. She goes to bed on Sunday night, resolving that the next morning she will go to the minister again, still hoping for some human intervention to fix her terror.
But she never makes it to the minister for help. On Monday morning, everything changes. The text describes the quiet arrival of grace.
It's so peaceful.
She wakes up a little before daylight. The terror is just gone. It is replaced by what she calls an easiness and calmness in her mind that she had never felt before.
And notice how this happens. It isn't the result of a new, better reading plan.
Right.
It isn't the result of a persuasive theological argument from her brother. It happens in the quiet, before the sun comes up, without her active striving.
The thrashing stopped.
The thrashing stopped. And as she lays there thinking about this new calmness, specific verses of Scripture flow into her mind without her actively searching for them.
Unbidden script.
Yeah. She recalls Psalm 12.6, "The words of the Lord are pure words." Then Proverbs 16.24, "Health to the soul and marrow to the bones." Then 1 John 1.7, "The blood of Christ cleanses from all sin."
Wow.
Edwards notes these verses were accompanied by a lively sense of the excellency of Christ and his sufficiency to satisfy for the sins of the whole world.
It is as if the verses she had frantically read while trying to save herself were now being spoken to her as a comfort.
Yeah, they changed from law to gospel for her.
She even takes Ecclesiastes 11.7, which says, "It is a pleasant thing for the eyes to behold the sun," and she applies it directly to Jesus Christ.
What's fascinating here is the total contrast between her strenuous efforts on Saturday and the effortless reception of grace on Monday.
It's night and day.
When she speaks to her brother that morning, she tells him she had seen Christ last night by faith. She actually laughs at her previous notion that she didn't have enough knowledge to be converted.
She laughs.
Yeah. She tells him God can make it quite easy.
God can make it quite easy. After nearly going blind trying to earn it, she realizes it's a gift. The text attributes this shift entirely to the operations of God's Spirit, overriding her human limitations. It is an unearned rescue. This is the mechanism theologians call regenerating grace.
We often think of grace as a pardon, you know. A judge bangs a gavel, says you are free to go, but you walk out of the courtroom as the exact same person.
Right, just a change in legal status.
But in the theological framework Edwards is operating in, regenerating grace isn't just a legal pardon. It's a complete hardware swap of the human heart.
A hardware swap. I like that.
It's the implanting of entirely new desires, affections, and inclinations. The text attributes this completely to the sovereignty of God, independent of her previous frantic striving.
And this internal peace immediately manifests in radical external changes. It completely alters how she views the world and other people.
Her focus shifts.
The shift in her affections is immediate and drastic. Before, she was entirely focused on her own spiritual survival, right?
Yeah, how do I save myself?
Now her focus shifts entirely away from herself. The text notes that by Wednesday, while enjoying a spiritual view of Christ's glory, her soul is filled with intense distress for Christless people.
She starts weeping for others.
She is overwhelmed considering their miserable condition.
She feels a strong inclination to immediately go out and warn sinners. She actually proposes to her brother that they go from house to house.
Just knocking on doors.
Yeah. Her brother has to restrain her, telling her that method is unsuitable for a woman in his societal position at the time.
Which is such an 18th century response.
It really is. But she tells her sister she loves all mankind. And her sister asks her a very simple question. Why do you love all mankind?
And Abigail's answer carries immense theological weight. She says, because God had made them.
That is a staggering reorientation of a human worldview.
It really is. She is no longer judging people based on how they treat her or what they can do for her. She's assigning value to human beings based purely on their origin as creations of God.
Yeah.
And this love isn't just a polite intellectual agreement. It has an overwhelming physical weight to it. The text details the intense physical toll of her spiritual joy.
It's physical.
At one point, she is at work in her shop. 3 people who were thought to have been recently converted walk in through the doorway. Her love for them is so strong, and the sight of them so affects her that she almost faints.
They literally have to stop talking about religion because her body cannot bear the emotional weight of the conversation.
In another instance, she goes to a private religious meeting. People ask her about her experiences. Simply relating what happened to her revives her joy so intensely that her physical strength fails.
She collapses.
They have to carry her and lay her on a bed.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean? It's easy to look at Abigail's frantic reading and fainting and think of it as just old-fashioned religious panic. Modern culture often treats faith as a purely private intellectual agreement. You check a box on a census form. You hold a specific set of beliefs in your head. But Abigail's faith literally causes her to collapse. Her nervous system is overloaded by joy and love. How should we interpret this extreme physical reaction to spiritual concepts?
Well, we have to remember Edward's role as a clinician here. He's observing that human beings are integrated units. We are not just floating minds in a vat.
No, we have bodies.
We have nervous systems, hormones, and physical limits. When the mind apprehends something of infinite beauty or infinite terror, the finite body struggles to process the voltage.
The voltage, yeah.
In Edward's view, the spiritual realm is the ultimate reality. Therefore, it makes sense that coming into contact with that reality would produce the most intense physical reactions a person could experience. Her fainting isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of the sheer magnitude of what her mind is trying to process.
It is like trying to run a high-voltage power line through a standard household wire. The wire is going to heat up and eventually short out. This overwhelming joy she's experiencing is fueled by vivid, almost overwhelming contemplations of specific divine attributes.
Edwards highlights a moment where she has a revelation of the glory of God in Christ. She recounts 4 specific words passing through her mind: wisdom, justice, goodness, and truth.
She notes that the word truth sank the deepest. She says the word was repeated in her mind over and over. Truth? Truth?
Yeah.
Her mind was so swallowed up with a sense of the glory of God's truth that she felt as though her life was slipping away. She tells Edward she saw it would be easy for God to take her life away just by revealing his glory to her.
And this vision of truth doesn't just stay in the abstract realm of theological concepts. She begins seeing the glory of God in the physical world around her. She experiences what theologians sometimes call a beatific vision in nature.
Let's break that concept down for a second. A beatific vision isn't a hallucination.
No, not at all.
It is seeing the ordinary world illuminated by the reality of its creator. She tells her sister that she used to think it would be pleasant to live in the middle of town, where all the action is.
Right, the hustle and bustle.
Now she finds it much more pleasant to sit in the country and see the wind blowing the trees and to behold the things God has made. The natural world has become a theater of God's glory for her.
But amidst these soaring emotional highs, her primary posture becomes one of extreme lowliness. She doesn't become proud of her spiritual visions.
Not at all.
True religious awakening, in Edward's estimation, always produces humility. It destroys the ego entirely.
She remarks that it is good to lie low before God, saying the lower the better. She finds it pleasant to think of lying in the dust all the days of her life, mourning for sin.
Yeah.
She even tells Edwards, her pastor, that she wants to come live at his house like a little child so he can instruct her in her duty.
Which is such a striking image.
We need to stop and acknowledge how this sounds to a modern audience, though. Dwelling on lying in the dust and mourning for sin sounds degrading to modern ears.
Oh, absolutely.
We live in a culture of self-empowerment, self-esteem, and self-actualization. To hear a young woman say she wants to lie in the dust all her life sounds like a severe lack of self-worth. It sounds oppressive.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, though, in her theological framework, accurate self-assessment, which she calls lowliness, is the exact mechanism that allows for maximum joy and dependence on God.
How so?
Think of it this way. If your ego is massive, you are constantly burdened with defending it, promoting it, and satisfying it.
Right, it's exhausting.
If someone insults you, you are devastated.
Yeah.
If you don't get what you want, you are bitter. But if you have embraced your absolute lowliness before God, the ego is deflated. You are freed from the burden of defending yourself.
You don't have to fight for your status anymore.
Yes. You are no longer the center of the universe. God is. Therefore, any good thing you receive is a staggering, joyful surprise rather than an expected entitlement. Her desire for the dust isn't depression. It is the ultimate freedom from self. It allows her to rely entirely on God's grace.
It is the realization that she brings nothing to the table, and yet she is invited to the feast anyway. That lowliness is the foundation of her gratitude.
That's spot on.
And this newfound joy and total dependence are soon put to the ultimate test. Because her chronic illness, which has been in the background this whole time, becomes terminal.
We enter the crucible of suffering. And her initial reaction to her impending death reveals how meticulously she is examining her own heart. Initially, she has great longings to die so she can be with Christ.
Which sounds very pious. You would think a pastor would applaud that sentiment.
You would think so. But Abigail applies critical thinking to her own desires. She stops herself and asks a highly logical question. If I long to die, why do I go to physicians?
It is brilliant logic. She catches herself in a contradiction. If she really wanted to die, she wouldn't be taking medicine.
Right. She concludes that her longings for death are not well regulated. She realizes she is trying to escape her current suffering rather than submitting to God's timing.
Wow, she forcefully corrects her own mindset. She interrogates herself, asking whether she would choose to live or die, to be sick or well. She works through this until she achieves a state of absolute submission.
She declares, I am quite willing to live and quite willing to die, quite willing to be sick and quite willing to be well, quite willing for anything that God brings upon me.
She neutralizes her own preferences, and she needs that resignation because the progression of her illness is brutal.
It's awful.
Edwards outlines the gruesome physical reality of her decline. We need to be very clear about what she's enduring. Her illness settles much in her throat. An inward swelling fills up her windpipe.
Yeah, she can't swallow.
Soon, she can only take in liquids. Eventually, the swelling is so severe that she struggles with strangling. Whatever liquid she tries to swallow flies out her nostrils. She is slowly, agonizingly starving to death while slowly suffocating.
She has a raging appetite, as the text explicitly states. She tells her sister that the worst bit of food thrown to the swine would be sweet to her.
That is just heartbreaking.
The physical agony of her condition cannot be overstated.
Yet in the midst of this starvation and strangulation, Edwards writes that she remains perfectly contented without the food. When she tries to get a little liquid down and fails and is exhausted by the effort, she looks at her sister with a smile and says, "Oh, sister, this is for my good."
It's hard to even comprehend that level of peace.
It is less like she is fighting the pain and more like a bridge designed to sway in an earthquake. If the bridge is rigid, it snaps. By completely surrendering her will to the outcome, she removes the rigidity of her own ego.
Oh, the martial arts approach. Redirecting the force.
Exactly. The physical pain is the earthquake, but her spiritual acceptance allows it to pass through her without breaking her mind. She isn't denying the physical reality of the pain, but she refuses to let it conquer her spirit.
And this profound acceptance turns her deathbed into a public display of internal peace. We enter her final days. The contrast between her physical decay and her spiritual joy is stark.
Very stark.
Her brother comes to visit and reads to her from the book of Job. He specifically reads a passage concerning worms feeding on the dead body.
Which, most people would find that horrifying, especially when they are days away from death.
Right, it's pretty morbid.
But Abigail appears with a pleasant smile. When they ask her why she is smiling, she says it was sweet to her to think of being in those circumstances.
Later, when her brother mentions that she might die soon, it fills her with a joy that almost overcomes her. She sees a company following a corpse to the grave outside her window, and she rejoices that she will soon follow them.
This raises an important question. How does someone in extreme agony, pining away with famine and thirst, claim she lives a heaven upon earth? Because that is what she tells her sister.
Yeah.
She is suffocating, she is starving, and she says she is living a heaven upon earth. She tells her sister it is good to suffer because God would have it so. It is best that things should be as God would have them.
It comes back to that total destruction of the ego we discussed earlier. Her will is completely merged with God's will. She has no competing desires.
Right.
Therefore, if God wills her to suffer, her suffering becomes an act of communion with God. The physical pain is loud, but the internal harmony is louder.
A few days before she dies, the neighbors come by. They ask if she is afraid. Her response is incredibly poetic. She replies that she has no fear. She says, "There is indeed a dark entry that looks somewhat dark, but on the other side there appears such a bright shining light that I cannot be afraid."
A dark entry. She acknowledges the reality of death. He doesn't pretend the process of dying isn't frightening or physically agonizing.
But the light on the other side eclipses the shadow of the doorway.
Exactly.
On June 27, 1735, after seemingly dying for 3 days, she passes away. Edwards notes she died without a struggle, like a person going to sleep.
Edwards provides a final assessment of her case. He concludes that her body was simply too frail for the magnitude of her spiritual experience. He writes that she had more grace and greater revelations of God than consisted with her frail state.
Like the voltage was too high.
Yeah, she needed to be free of the clog of a weak body.
The clog of a weak body. Her physical form couldn't contain the voltage of her joy. Edwards mentions that he read his account to her pious neighbors. They told him his written record fell far short of capturing her actual humility and lowliness of heart.
Which tells us that even this detailed clinical account is only a shadow of the reality they witnessed in that room.
Let's step back and summarize the arc of what we've looked at today. We watched a rational, reserved girl try to earn her way to heaven through intense mechanical reading,
And we saw that effort fail.
resulting in a wall of terrifying realization about her own structural guilt and inability to save herself. We witnessed her receive an unearned grace in the quiet hours of the morning that caused her to physically collapse from the weight of joy and compassion for others.
Yeah.
Finally, we saw her face a brutal, agonizing death by starvation, with genuine smiles and a total, peaceful submission to God's will.
It is a remarkable documentation of a complete psychological and spiritual reorientation.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the historical archives, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. Something we haven't touched on yet, but that screams from the pages of this text when you place it next to our lives today.
Okay.
Modern society invests billions of dollars and endless daily effort into eradicating physical pain. We seek to extend our lifespans at all costs. We arrange our entire lives around the pursuit of constant, frictionless comfort. But looking at Abigail Hutchinson, I have to ask, in insulating ourselves so thoroughly from suffering, in running so frantically away from our own physical frailty, do we accidentally shut off the very mechanism that allows the human mind to experience the overwhelming, gravity-defying joy that she found?
That's a challenging thought.
She found a heaven on earth precisely when her body failed her. Are we trading the possibility of that kind of joy for the guarantee of a comfortable numbness? Keep questioning, keep reading, and we will catch you next time on Reformed Thinking.